I left the room and board that day full of hope, full of excitement. Since Lucinda was going to be in town recording there soon, I thought maybe we could meet up. Months before, I had returned home without interviewing Lucinda. At that time, I made peace with that fact. I felt I had dug deep enough and reflected enough. I needed to move on. But the truth is, underneath that, I really did want a chance to speak with her. I wanted to ask her these abiding questions. That hadn't been possible before, but because of me making a connection with her and having Ray as an intermediary, it could be possible now. Then, anxious thoughts arose in my mind. If I do this, what if she agrees to meet me but pulls out at the last minute? Could I bear another massive disappointment? What if we met and our conversation just didn't flow? What if it was awkward? What if she didn't like my music and couldn't hide that fact? What if we talked and I was disappointed with what she had to say? What if this interview destabilized my confidence even more? I really didn't know what would happen if I interviewed Lucinda. It was a big risk, a stretch beyond. And then I got a call on the phone. The interview was on. I had to do it. I would meet Lucinda Williams the following evening at the Room and Board studio. You are listening to Finding Lucinda from the Bluegrass Situation. I'm your host, Ismay. This is a multi-part audio documentary about a road trip I took in 2022. I was a budding singer-songwriter. I lived and worked on my family's ranch, but I wanted to be out in the world, playing music, performing, pursuing my dreams. I had this background of having grown up in a music family. As a kid, I watched the best of the best in roots music perform live at a festival. That put me under a tremendous amount of pressure. I worried that if I wasn't a big success like the people I saw growing up, I wouldn't be living up to the life I was given. I was worried I would let people down, reveal my weaknesses, if I put myself out there as an artist. That all made me unsure of whether I should go out and try to play music at all. But I had an idea, an opportunity to grasp at a sliver of hope for a way forward. I decided I would trace the roots of my musical hero, Lucinda Williams. Hopefully, it would help me confront my sense of inadequacy. I hoped it would help me find my path. I thought that through understanding Lucinda's story, I could gain insight on what to do with mine. This is the final episode of the road trip journey, episode 11, Meeting Lucinda Williams. I would recommend that you start this series from the beginning if you haven't already. And I'll also add that Finding Lucinda isn't just a podcast, it's also a documentary film. As of the recording of this episode, the film is now out to rent or buy. Just look up Finding Lucinda. You can also watch the movie on our film release tour. We're going all the way across the nation starting in the fall of 2025. Each night features live music with special guests and a screening of the documentary. We're going to Montana, Idaho, California, New York, Arkansas, Louisiana, Illinois, and more. Find out about the tour and places you can watch the film at findinglucinda.com. In contemplating finally getting to meet Lucinda, it was clear that I had put a tremendous amount of pressure on this single potential relationship. I had sewn my narrative into hers with my own two hands. I based so much of my growth on understanding her story. A lot rode on this interview. Simply put, it had to go well. After all I had been through on the journey, all of the work I had put into this project, failure would be crushing. It might impact my ability to put myself out there as an artist in the future. I felt like a moth jumping into heavy wind. The delicate dust on my back and my fragile wings at risk of being damaged forever. I needed to really prepare for this critical moment, my upcoming conversation with Lucinda, the opportunity to wrap up my whole journey. I watched videos of journalists interviewing her to get a hint of what would and wouldn't work. I reviewed the previous conversations I had along my journey with her collaborators. I wanted to understand her mind as much as I could. I also decided I'd bring a few items as touch points in the conversation. I packed her father's letter that I had found in Austin and photographs of her busking in her 20s. I packed the tape of Lucinda's song Spin that I found in the Malaco archives. Last, I packed my guitar. Perhaps I could play her a song. Maybe I'd be too chicken to take it out and sing, but I thought, who knows? Maybe playing a song could help us connect. Maybe upon opening the latches of that black guitar case, I could find that confident small part of myself. That little piece of my heart that was like Lucinda when she made her first record at Malaco in the 1970s. I drove to the heavily paved neighborhood of the room and board studio. I parked and prepared to enter the building. Lucinda was inside and I was outside, wringing my hands. It was the late afternoon. Glowing soft sunlight bounced from the pavement. The muscles in my upper back were tense, tight, wound. I stared straight ahead, motionless. I hadn't felt this anxious more than one or two other times in my entire life. I felt bogged down, almost like I was ready to get test results from a doctor about some condition. But I needed to get it over with, to face whatever this evening would bring to me. I approached the door to the room and board.
Rip off the frickin' Band-Aid.
My backpack was heavy with papers, tapes, photos. Holding my guitar shifted my weight heavily to one side. My breathing was shallow as I waited for someone to come answer my knocks.
Hi.
Avery.
Nice to see you.
Hey. So nice to see you.
How's it going?
It was Ray. I walked down the hallway, and my shoulders loosened up ever so slightly. And there Lucinda sat. She was at the dining room table. She wore a baby blue-colored leather jacket. She had sparkling eyeshadow to match. And she had a Willie Nelson shirt on. Immediately, she was sweet. Ray left me and Lucinda to sit and talk. Just us two.
So nice to meet you.
I know, same here. Well, I'm very honored and flattered, of course, that my music helped you in your journey.
It certainly has. I mean,
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, it's really because there's a lot to it, you know, there's a lot always to uncover. And can I show you some stuff that we found in the archives?
Yes.
All right. So I went to the archives in Austin where they have a bunch of your dad's stuff.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Oh,
And-
I still hadn't been there yet to see that.
Yeah, and there's tons of stuff, and there's pictures and letters and everything, and I'll show you this letter that we found that your dad wrote about you.
Dear Miss Saxton, because it's very important to me that my children know the difference between good poetry and bad, and be exposed to as much good and as little bad as possible. And because the poem Cindy was to have memorized for today is such a terribly bad poem in almost every way a poem can be bad, I have forbidden Cindy to learn it. Wow. I'm sorry to have risked offending you, and I hope I haven't. It's simply that my children are surrounded by too much bad music, bad painting, and bad cinema to add bad poetry to the bad obstacles I have to overcome in developing in them any sense of artistic integrity. Thank you for your understanding, Miller Williams. Written at May 31st, 1964. Wow, I'll miss him so much. Great sense of humor.
Lucinda took the letter and clutched it to her chest. She smiled brightly, full of joy. I think the memory of her father must have been flashing through her mind in that moment. His essence, his smile, his style. In the middle of the table where we sat was a cheese tray and grapes and crackers. Usually when I'm nervous, like at a party, I eat all the grapes, one by one by one, until they're gone in seemingly minutes. But I was more anxious sitting there than I'd ever been before. I barely noticed the food or anything around me. The interview had begun so fast. I felt like a racehorse taking the first steps right out of the gate when I didn't even know that the bell was coming. I was trying to find my footing without rushing. I was trying hard to remember my research, trying to connect with Lucinda. I wanted to ask the right questions, but I also wanted to be honest and genuine.
What does it make you, like, does it remind you of any specific memories of your dad?
Just overall, him overall. His brilliance, his intelligence, his humor, the way he looked at life.
I'm kind of curious here, like, how did he look at life?
Well, I think it's all in here. I think this really describes him to a T, this letter. The fact that he was concerned about, bad art or versions, he said bad poetry, bad paintings, bad. He told the teacher he didn't want me to read it because it wasn't good enough. That's where I got my, propensity for being a perfectionist, I guess, or something. I don't know. I don't like to use the word perfectionist because it was used too much after that car wheels fiasco.
Well, it's a balance of perfectionism, but also integrity and caring.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean...
But nobody says that. They just say perfectionist.
I don't see it that way. I mean, if you were a perfectionist, you probably wouldn't have put any records out, right? A true perfectionist never does anything.
Right. And I've known people like that, other artists who did a really great album and then just got stuck and couldn't quite let themselves go enough to get another album out.
And did you ever, have a point where you were sort of stuck and you were afraid to make something new?
I was kind of stuck a little bit after Car Wheels because it garnered so much attention and from all the journalists and magazines and everything, and it won a Grammy.
I'm curious to hear, what was it about that experience that for you made it hard to make another?
Because I felt like I'd raised the bar so high that now I'm going to have to, continue to stay up there with every record after Car Wheels. So it made me feel it makes you feel a little self-conscious about what you're doing instead of just doing it, and being organic with the whole process. And I felt like other people were going to compare whatever I did after Car Wheels with Car Wheels. You know, they'd either say it sounds too much like Car Wheels, or it's too different from Car Wheels that they wouldn't like it, or it's too much like Car Wheels and they wouldn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of pressure.
It is, that I put on myself, probably, mostly.
That's how it mostly is. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's hard enough to make a record to start with, but when you have the public eye and expectations on you, and like you said, the comparison of now people have a piece of work that they're always going to compare it to,
Right.
and that makes it kind of intimidating.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
But you kept making records anyways, and they weren't like Car Wheels, they're their own wonderful thing. Because you didn't let that get to you, that pressure.
No, I had to overcome it, you know, in order to keep moving forward.
Yeah, and it's kind of like idea of moving forward. That's sort of a lot what I feel like my journey's been about. When you don't know, how do you keep moving forward?
Yeah. When the alternative isn't that appealing, you know, then I think that's what makes you go ahead and move forward. Because what was I going to do, just quit making records? I mean, and I was being inspired and influenced by other music all this time, too. You know, I'm always listening to other artists' stuff. And like I remember when Bob Dylan's Time Out of Mind came out, and I loved it. I thought it was amazing and great, beautiful, musically, artistically, just groundbreaking for him. And, you know, lyrically, it wasn't maybe, you know, as much like his earlier albums, which he got criticized for, I might add, you know, which I thought was ridiculous. I started reading reviews of Time Out of Mind, and that was one of the things. One of them said, you know, this just isn't up to Bob Dylan's standards, and, you know, the lyrics aren't that great, they're not that interesting and all that. But I understood, I felt like I understood what he was trying to do, which was break out of his usual positively 4th Street, Subterranean Homesick Blues type songs. They were like poems. Do songs that kind of relied as much or more on the music as the lyrics. That's what I felt like he was doing.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand why, you know, the critics didn't get it.
It's kind of scary when your work is out there that much and people have such high expectations of you. It seems like
They
all
still managed to tear you down. But that kind of gave me a sense of, okay, he's going through that too, you know.
I think that's the scary thing about putting your work out there, and even about it being well received, is all of a sudden then people might want to tear you down. That's what people don't realize, is as soon as you're lifted up, you're put in a different position as an artist, you know?
Yes, and you're not really allowed to do something different, you know, or move in a different direction.
Yeah, and that's sort of like the price you pay, I guess, for people have different expectations of you because they're attached to a version of you that you've grown past.
Yeah.
You've already done that, you know?
Right. That's how I felt when I read that about him. You know, he's painted his masterpiece. Leave him alone. You know, God.
So I also brought a couple other photos. You busking on Guadalupe.
Oh yeah, I know that photo.
We've got 5 of them, but I'll give you my favorite one first. It says donations for Lucinda on that little piece of paper.
Yeah, I remember this. It was 1974, I think it was.
And what do you think, like, do you think this person here in this photo, how did she see herself?
Well, I think back then, I mean, I was thinking, you know, wouldn't it be great if I didn't have to do this, if I could just make records and make a living playing music? That was what was on my mind back then, probably.
And did you think, when you were sort of having that hope that you could make records and play music, do you think you had doubts about that, or do you think you felt like just going to make it happen?
I might have had some doubts just because of, my whatever small amount of experience I'd had with record labels and music business people had been, they didn't really get me, I didn't think. And I knew it was going to be hard, and it was. But I enjoyed doing what I was doing, playing for people who didn't know me outside in Austin. And, I was welcomed very warmly by that town. That was when I very first moved there. And, the streets were crawling with singer-songwriters, and venues and bars were bursting with live music, and it was a pretty magical, wonderful place to be back then. I just kept doing what I did and hoping that the right person would come along and figure it out. And that's kind of what happened, I guess. The first label who really got me was a British punk label, Rough Trade. I'd done a demo tape, and at one point, and it ended up in the offices of Rough Trade Records because it was getting kind of passed around between the labels and stuff. Yeah, they got, I think it's because they're a European or British label, to begin with. So they weren't hung up on a lot of the same issues that the American labels were hung up on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My journey kind of following your footsteps has been to understand, how do I learn, not by having to be the same as you, but how do I learn by what you've done to maintain your integrity in your work,
I just always knew those people were out there somewhere. It just took longer.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. You knew the people that would understand were out there.
Yeah, like the Rough Trade guys. They understood. And, they sent me to Europe to tour over there, and they were very supportive and really opened a door for me.
Yeah. Wow. So I think it's what I'm hearing to learn from your journey is that you had a confidence and a faith that there would be people out there that would understand what you were doing.
Yeah, because I would meet people along the way who would respond the right way and understood, and, they would tell me not to give up, and, so I would get a certain amount of strength from that. It might just be one person here or another person there, but,
And I guess, I wonder, so it's super interesting because when I've been on this journey to kind of understand what made you able to continue creating, and not just creating, but meeting each record with a new spirit of commitment to your craft, it sounds a lot to me like you had a faith and you had a deeply held belief in the arts.
Yeah. It's probably because of my father, because he had that, and how important it is. The importance of all that.
That's a powerful thing to grow up with, just having that faith in that.
It is, yeah. It was a powerful thing to grow up with. I'm very grateful for it.
Here came one of the biggest revelations of that evening, perhaps of the entire trip. Over the course of this project, I questioned many people about Lucinda's confidence. I asked time and again what propelled her forward. Why didn't she quit when she was working as a busser in a taco shop in her 30s? Why didn't she quit when demos didn't turn into record deals? Why didn't she quit when 10 plus years of hard work faded behind her with such little income from songwriting? And here was the reason. She grew up in a family and a culture that believed in the intrinsic worth of art. She was surrounded by people who understood what it actually took to become a writer. I had suspected this. My previous interviews and research revealed that it was likely that her father's background as an artist laid the ground for her to become such a great songwriter. Lucinda's words at the room and board proved my theory was true. And something important to add is that her father wasn't just any artist. He was slow to develop. He found success in his 40s, 50s, 60s, much like Lucinda. Additionally, he was practicing an art form that was relatively esoteric, poetry. The kind of art form that most people do for its own sake, without expectation for financial reward or fame. Her parents created a social circle around her that reinforced the idea that being an artist has intrinsic worth, that being a writer is a long process. Lucinda was surrounded by people like poet Frank Stanford. He had to work as an unlicensed land surveyor to make ends meet. Meanwhile, he wrote prolifically on the side. And Frank told her, when she was just getting started in her early 20s, that it didn't matter if your audience would be small, that it was still important to write. Being around so many artists, Lucinda could see up close that roadblocks and failures are part of the process. These roadblocks, they aren't a sign to stop doing it. Writing without being a well-known cultural figure was not an embarrassment to her or her parents. So it was clear Lucinda and I differed in our origins, and it made an impact. I felt that if at a certain age I wasn't successful, it meant that I wasn't doing something worthwhile. I didn't grow up in a family of professional artists. I grew up as an audience member. I was fortunate that my parents were supportive. They valued arts and music. However, I never had an insider knowledge of how that world worked when I was a kid. Also, I didn't have a narrative of belonging to that group. I was an outsider to the culture of artists, musicians, and writers. Oftentimes, I felt like a phony, an interloper. Like I wasn't as genuine of an artist as everyone else. I was a square, a suit, an institutionalist trying to force myself into that world. So, when I would play at some bar and pack up my gear and someone would come up to me and say that they liked what I was doing, I had trouble believing them. It made me uncomfortable. But when someone came up to Lucinda at a show, told her they liked her music, told her she had something to offer and not to give up, she believed that person. And she believed that those people who would love her work were out there. She didn't need to worry about that. But circumstance is not destiny. Maybe I could learn from her upbringing. I could choose to cultivate what Lucinda described, the idea that it might be hard, but there would be people out there who would appreciate what I do. Even if it wasn't a ton of people, even if I didn't end up successful in the way I imagined I had to be, being an artist was still worth it. Artistic expression, creativity, and writing were still meaningful. They weren't embarrassing. They weren't outside the boundaries of what I could be, of what I was, of what I am.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just wonder too, like, with my own songwriting, sometimes I feel a little bit like, man, like, sometimes it's hard to keep pushing for your vision. Sometimes when I go to a venue and I'll play more contemplative music, that's just what I enjoy, what I care to create, and people want to dance and party, you know? And it's like, I wonder if you dealt with that kind of a thing where you're sort of like, how do I remind myself and surround myself with people that remind me that I should be focused on my own vision of creativity wherever that takes me, not on what other people think it should be.
Yeah, that's a hard one, because you know what people want to hear, but part of it is, are you going to be able to do that? I mean, you know, if you're a singer-songwriter, folk singer, that type of thing, it's going to be challenging to just all of a sudden jump into this rock or pop motif. I mean, especially if that's not what you want to do.
I mean, it gets back to what you were saying about having to have, you know, your own, I don't know, we were just talking about having your own vision and what you were really saying, which is like, you kept making a record because what was the alternative? You know, you just kept making records because that's what you did, and that's sort of like what I feel like it is sometimes to be an artist is, it's not like in some alternate universe I wouldn't want something else or something, but it's, I just make what I make because it's who I am, and I can't be something else, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I didn't mind, like, I was just passionately, madly in love with Chrissie Hynde and the Pretenders. And I would have, if I knew how to do that, I would have done it in an instant, you know, but I don't know how, I still don't know how she does it, you know. Her voice has this quality to it that I can't figure out where it comes from, and the songs are just amazing, and, you know. And there are a lot of artists like that I really looked up to, but I just didn't know how to do it. You know, I didn't know how to do that kind of music, really. Because I'd started out, you know, wanting to write songs like Bob Dylan or Leonard Cohen. And now I'm listening to the Pretenders and Talking Heads and, you know, the Doors. And I mean, because they had great songs, you know, and their songs rocked. But when you take away all of the extra stuff on the songs, like the music part of it, they were really great songs, you know, lyrically and everything. Great melodies, great lyrics, which is what I was doing, paying attention to melodies and trying to write good lyrics and good melodies, which is what they were doing too, but they just had that extra thing of having the beats, I guess, you know, this beat thing to it. But you can see, looking back, how it's trying to kind of dip into that a little, like when I wrote Change the Locks. And sometimes it would just turn into more of a rock song, because I would bring the song in to the studio and show the guys and the band, and they would play it, and it would just kind of become what it became.
It's a tricky balance between being inspired by somebody while still maintaining your own vision. And clarifying that to make it the best it can be. And I mean, there's a lot of people who probably have the same experience with your music. They listen to your music and they think, dang, I wish I sounded like that. I mean, I felt that way before. I have, it's true. It's been like, you know what? Man, I would give whatever, $1 billion if I could be just like that, you know? You focused on just on your own, making your own records and writing your own way. It's had this like staying power that a lot of songwriters, young songwriters, are really connected with. That, you know what's something that I find kind of funny is that I think about every once in a while is the great thing about not being somebody else is you get to enjoy them yourself, you know, like, because you made your music and I'm me and you're you, I get to love it as me. And that's a really cool thing. And that's one thing that sometimes makes me sad about being a musician is that, you know, you're always in your own head about your own writing and you're worried about how it comes across. And so, you know, sometimes I wish I could just step away from myself and enjoy things as they are, you know?
I hear that. Yeah, that's hard to do. But you have to try to do that, you know? I mean, I try to surround myself with people who just, you know, tell me how good I am and everything. But, you know, that what you're talking about, I hear you loud and clear. You know, it's just That's the thing about being an artist, being a musician, singer-songwriter, and all that in this business that we're in. You know, there are all these psychological issues that you end up dredging through, you know, pulling through all of this journey.
You were talking about lugging something around. I think that's what people take for granted about artists. They don't realize how much they're carrying to make a song, you know?
The psychological impact of it all. And at the same time, though, if you're lucky, you can use that for your own growth, you know, at the same time. Okay, I've got to learn how to like myself, you know, or love myself, which people spend thousands of dollars going to see therapists for to try to figure out how to do that. We have to do it on our own, but our music helps, I think, helps with that.
Definitely.
So, but therein lies the, you know, kind of complexity of it, because on the one hand, you're creating this art, and you're also trying to grow as a person and become a better person. So, you know, so.
Yeah, for sure. So when I went to Malaco Studios, where you made your first record.
Oh, yeah.
We went and talked to Wolf, who was the engineer that was there when you were there. And he
Gerald Wolf Stevenson.
Yes, exactly. And he, it's funny enough, because we were there, he went back into the archives, and he found these reel-to-reel tapes that he'd never listened to since you did your session in the late 70s.
Wow.
And he realized that in those tapes were these songs that had never, you know, been published and everything. And is it okay if I share one of those with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be great.
I thought this song was really cool and really interesting, and I think showed kind of a really interesting side of your songwriting early on. Okay, so I'm going to play you one of the songs that we heard, and it should come up on here. Let's see.
Just listen to first time.
So that's me and Wolf talking.
After pressing the clicky play button on the tape machine, I turned the volume up high. Out rang Spin. I had brought this recording to Lucinda, hoping it might bring up some old memories. I thought maybe it would help her to speak to the influences she heard in these early recordings. I thought maybe one day she'd even want to share the song with her fans or something. But something happened that I did not expect. She didn't like it. I turned it back down as fast as I could. Looking back now, it makes sense. Most artists cringe at their early work. My throat went dry. I worried maybe I'd accidentally derailed the progress we'd made in our conversation. I had hoped that I didn't offend her. And so I just decided to take the opportunity and change course. As had happened so often in this project, I had to let the failures drive me towards another point of action. I told her I learned to play spin and said maybe I could just perform that song for you. And she was excited. She said, yes, I'd love to hear it. We walked down a couple of steps into the recording space. It was below the dining area with all the instruments surrounding us. I brought out my 12-string guitar. I can't play you the original tape of Spin, and I can't play my cover on this podcast. However, I do want you to hear both. The only way that you can do that is to watch the documentary film. It's also titled Finding Lucinda. It's out now. If you watch, you can hear this rare early Lucinda song. It's unusual. It's completely unlike the rest of her music. And I think it's great. I finished my cover of Spin. I was hoping that this performance could smooth over the tension that I felt.
Wow. God, you made it sound like a better song.
I don't know about that. I love your
Yes,
version.
it's true. I'm telling you. That's so sweet.
Well, it's a beautiful
I love
song.
it when your voice goes up.
I got that from you.
And I got that from other singers.
Yeah.
When I very, very first started in the very beginning, I used to listen to Joan Baez and Judy Collins all the time, you know. And they had these, well, especially Joni, but Judy too had this great range, and, you know, they could sing in these real high keys, and I never could. And that was part of finding myself, was accepting my voice, the limitations of my voice. Emmylou Harris one time said something like, work with your limitations, and that then becomes your strength.
And writing, and that's the cool thing about being a songwriter, is you get to write songs that
fit your voice, exactly. I remember thinking when I started first writing songs, one of the reasons I wanted to be able to write good songs was so I didn't have to depend on my voice as my main thing, you know, because I really appreciated singers like Linda Ronstadt and artists like that who didn't really write songs that much, but you know, their voices were so amazing and big and full and unique and powerful that, you know, they could sing covers, and, you know, that became their thing. But I thought, well, if I write really good songs, people won't criticize my voice too much or something. Like Bob Dylan when he started, you know. Well, because, you know, you hear these other singers and they sound so big and powerful and, you know, carry so much weight and presence and just, you know, on all that. And there's a part of you that wants to do that too, you know. Exactly. But then I would listen to artists like Nick Drake. He's a good one, a good example. And I would hear the strength in what he did, even though it was very inside, you know, and smaller and inside, but it still had the beauty and depth and power that other stuff had, just in a different way. Listen to Sandy Denny. She made a couple of solo albums that are just brilliant. And her voice is really, really soft and light, but beautiful, and had this depth and strength to it that draws you in, like you're talking about. You know, people loved her.
Are there any doubts that you have to work through even now in order to come back to the studio and record again?
It's always a little nerve-wracking being in a recording studio trying to record songs that you've just written and make them come out right and not be too self-critical and all of that. You know, I'm sure everybody goes through that. But it's a learning experience at the same time. And I always learn something, you know, through everything that I'm doing, even though it might be frustrating and difficult, you know. I try to take something away from it that I can use again.
It sounds to me like you're not detached. When you're coming
Right.
here, you're engaged with the process.
Absolutely. I want to be engaged with every step of the process when it comes to making a record.
Do you find yourself writing more about memories now than you used to?
Yeah, I think so. It seems like the older I've gotten, the more I look back on things, like in my childhood and all of that.
Yeah.
But that's what Carvels on a Gravel Road was about, really. But I've kind of taken that template and worked with that, you know, other times with different songs.
Yeah, and I mean, I find for me that when Lucinda mentioned writing about her early memories, it reminded me of something her father said. In episode 2 of Finding Lucinda, I described her father's work and influence. I quoted from his book, Making a Poem. This book is a guide to writers. It describes the process and life of the poet. In a chapter titled Writing Your Own Poem, he said this: "Every act of writing is an excursion into memory. This is especially true of poetry. Make sure it's your memory into which you travel and not someone else's. Even if the events in the poem involve an invented character, the emotions surrounding what happens and what the imagination does with those events must come from your own history of abuse or contentment, faith or uncertainty, and no one else's. Let the poem know what you've learned in your life."
That occurs, yeah. And I also learned that when I'm writing about another person, like Blaze Foley in Drunken Angel, I have to be able to be empathetic with the character I'm writing about in order for it to work really. Like, not be judgmental or that sort of thing. Pointing a finger, it has to be something I understand. It's hard to do. It's hard to write a song about somebody who basically screwed up and without making it sound judgmental and that sort of thing, But you also don't want to sound overly mushy about it. Mm-hmm. So, that balance is hard to find a lot of times.
When I write about somebody who's messed up in their life, I think it helps me make peace with a part of myself that maybe I'm trying to.
Well, you can just look at them and watch the paths they took and the choices they made.
And why do you feel like you're drawn to those kinds of, like Blaze Foley characters? What draws you to that?
They're interesting. I mean, I wasn't really drawn to him as much as his situation, the story, around him, because it wasn't just him. I saw it played itself over and over on repeat with a significant amount of artists. Kurt Cobain, Townes Van Zandt, Graham Parsons, Jim Morrison, on and on. Why'd you let go of your guitar? Why'd you ever go this far? Why did you give up? We could probably go on and on and on all night till the sun came up. I think you already know what to do, and you don't need me to tell you. You just need, like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz almost, you were always able to go home. All you had to do is tap your shoes together. That used to make me so mad when I'd watch that. I was mad at Glinda, the good witch, because she didn't just say it to begin with. Like all that time, Dorothy wanted to go home, and finally Glinda says, "You always have the power. You've got the red shoes on. Just go like this. 1, 2, 3, and you'll be back home again." Like, thanks a lot. Why didn't you tell me before? You made me go through all this horrible stuff. And then she finally got home. But in that regard, you always knew the answers. But I'm always happy to reinforce and help in that way. But you're a beautiful, wonderful artist, and don't let anybody take that away from you.
I bid farewell after a thrilling evening. It was more than I had even expected it could be. Lucinda did turn out to be the sage I was looking for, first in her lyrics, then in our conversation. I made my way back to California, and I suppose it is important for me to tell you what I did. After all, it seems like I set out on this trip to answer the question, Am I good enough to really put myself out there as an artist? Do I have enough to offer to make it worth it? To follow in Lucinda's footsteps and be a singer-songwriter fully? But I realized that this was sort of the wrong question, because there wasn't a this side of the line, that side of the line answer. This idea that I did have something worth it felt too based in a notion of the talented artist and everyone else. And that's something I don't believe in. But to be concrete, the answer is that yes, I did decide to change. I decided to stop working on my family's ranch. I simply couldn't be a singer-songwriter and a rancher. I couldn't do both properly. I wanted to find a place of my own. I wanted to live somewhere where I could write and define my own vision of life away from my family. So I moved away, and I wrote more albums. I did more shows. And I tried to stop holding myself back with extraneous commitments. I decided to toss this question of whether or not I was good enough to be an artist behind me. It didn't serve me anymore. I would never be satisfied with a sense of being deserving or undeserving. I would simply have to find that voice inside of myself that believes in the intrinsic worth of a poem, a story, and a song. I would have to face another blank page time and again. I had to let music and its reception be whatever it could be. I couldn't let a certain type of reception determine my worth and my songwriting. Thank you for listening to Finding Lucinda. This is the final chapter of my road trip journey. We will have several more episodes. Rather than recounting the road trip, these episodes will be a bit different. They'll be touching on the process of making the film and more. And of course, I'll still be discussing Lucinda's work, influences, and impact. I hope you can join us. And I hope you can find your own way to create your next song.